We do want this to be, kind of interactive. We don't have the biggest group here.
Who are you?
Oh yeah, who am I? So I'm Kent Norman. I always forget that. So I'm Kent Norman. I'm from the University of Maryland, College Park campus. I'm actually in the psychology department. I've been doing human factors research for many years, and in the past 8 years or so have gotten into the psychology of video games. So we have a gaming lab, have people come in and play games and play testing, and then fill out whole bunches of surveys on the games at the end of the session. And I'm glad we've got some nice background music.
That's as smart as you
I know. Well, it's kind of like this in my class anyway. I would play background music. So in reality, virtual reality has been around for a long time. The concepts in science fiction have been around for a long time. And visionaries have been having great visions. Even going back to this presentation in 1956, Morton Hellberg, had this idea: I want to create a really sensory experience, to be immersive, to be three-dimensional. So he developed this thing called the sensorium, which is it's actually just like a 5-minute movie that you sit down and watch, but it's one of those trying to get all of your senses. It even had a fan that would blow air in your face when you're racing, bounce you around over bumps, and even had a smell vials that would emit the odors. So it was really kind of cool. They only had like 3 or 4 films that were used, like a motorcycle ride through. But I think this is the guy who was really the pioneer for really developing a system in which you moved around and had that experience. It was kind of a very kludgy system because they didn't have the kind of motion sensors and everything back then. Everything was connected via mechanical devices measuring the location you turn in your head. But they did actually have stereoscopic vision with little CRTs that projected into this poor graduate student's eyeballs. And yes, here it is. Getting into the gaming industry, Nintendo jumped in, and it was such a sad thing because, here was, Gunpei Yoko, who was he invented the D-pad. He invented so much stuff, the Game Boy, and then somehow he decided to create a 3D version of this, and it was so bad that it was recalled like after a year. Anybody ever use one of these? Yeah. Was it great?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Hey.
Well, it's cool now, in retrospect, and I guess at the time, but a lot of people argue, well, it wasn't really virtual reality; it was really just a 3D display.
Yeah.
But I guess the great thing, money has to funnel in to do the research and development for all these sorts of things. So it's great that we have a military. It's great that we have NASA. They pumped a lot of money into the development of VR. So we learned a tremendous amount about the human factors. And actually, Mike, you supplied this slide.
Well, it's just that, you jump, we were looking at what was going on in the 60s, and then Virtual Boy came out, but development had continued all throughout the years, and they did make great strides, and that's kind of what has allowed us to come to this point where we can put it on a mobile device, or, because they did all of that background, they didn't get, they didn't get affected by the Virtual Boy and the consumer, distaste for what happened. They were able to, see the value in it and, use it for training, simulation, and things like that. And they, if you go to the next slide, there's they use it in universities, and they study human behavior and all kinds of factors, which cognition and interaction, applications for training and education and therapy, and all those venues that are valuable research.
Yeah, so I was actually involved in part of the research at the University of Maryland. The issue was the setup was with the military to assemble these rockets, and to put these things together was a number of steps you had to go through. And it's not something that they wanted people to do before they were really kind of trained to do it, because they could explode right in their face. So virtual reality created this possibility of training in a totally safe environment. And then the only danger would be, you hit your head or trip over something. And so they ran a study between training with the VR, assembling all these parts and things, versus a videotape demonstration of how to do it, versus a paper manual. And videotape was the best. So virtual reality actually turned out to be confusing, difficult.
Wow.
Yeah. So the problem actually has been that in the research, some of it it's been exciting, but not always compelling, or it hasn't always really worked. It's just a great idea, but then if you actually run the studies, it doesn't work out. So consequently, in my lab, I'm in the human-computer interaction lab, we have not done any VR research at all. So a little disclaimer, I'm not that experienced with it, so that's why I've got Mike and Sujam on the panel.
And some of the research even done by academic institutions have been fascinating. They found that in a room about this size, maybe a little bit larger, they asked people to walk in a straight line, and they did, but in a circle. The VR told them they were walking in a straight line.
Yeah. So you can get away with some cool tricks with that. One of the things that has been accomplished pretty well is head tracking, the stereoscopic display. Sometimes there's this problem of lag time, end to end, from the system getting your movement to actually changing what's being projected into your eyes. That has been shortened tremendously, and so it's getting much, much better. Part of the problem has been, what size of room you actually can be in.
Right.
And that's been kind of difficult. One of the solutions, anybody know about some of the solutions they've tried to come up with for creating a big room?
Shortly after the Oculus Kickstarter, I saw a Kickstarter for a giant, basically bowl
Yeah.
with rollers on it. So a person would stand in it and they could take steps. But because of the design of that, you would always sort of be in the same place even though you were walking.
Exactly.
I remember seeing a Kickstarter for that. I never know it. I don't remember if it got funded or not.
Yeah,
We saw something like that.
there were two. There was the Omni treadmill, and then the Whiz Dish, and they're both still making progress.
I think part of it, the problem was they were waiting for the final version of the Oculus.
Right.
Because it was supposed to be a meeting system.
So if it actually works out, it'll be one more peripheral that you have to buy. Okay.
Yeah, and the boom in mobile technology has actually, Palmer Luckey actually was working at a VR research lab and realized that, hey, the screens have dropped so much and the processors have increased so much, and all these factors have come together at this moment in time that we could actually make something that's compelling, that's affordable for a consumer, and could be handled on a home system in the near future. So it took all these different factors of long time research and then the technology to get to an affordable place for it to actually come to where we are on the brink of actual having a consumer product.
But there's also this really interesting, Dr. Norman and Mike just brought up, kind of countering those, is the the idea that where does VR works, right? I mean, it's not been very successful, but it's been used to the academic and the industry for a long time as well, even though we don't see it as out. But there's been a use for it long term. The problem with it is it has specific use for certain areas, and it works great, but it's not for every single aspect of it so far, right? So, and that's been the biggest challenge.
Right. So the military will spend, $100,000, $1 million on simulator, flight simulators, for example, tank simulators for going into a battlefield and combat zones. But, nobody's going to buy one of these for your house, and you're playing the same game over and over again because it's been designed for that particular system. So here's VR 101. So basically, you've got a set of goggles with stereoscopic display. We have to be able to track the head in XYZ location, where it is. Also in pitch, roll, and yaw, which, down, left, right. And that's a lot of information for these sensors to pick up. And second, you've got to have some kind of control over your environment. So a lot of them use either a pointing device or some kind of a data glove. So with those, again, you've got to have, where is it, X, Y, Z, pitch, roll, and yaw. And some of the systems now are suggesting, well, we'd also like to know where this person is, what his position is. Is he kneeling, sitting, one foot in his mouth? And so down at the bottom are things like motion capture cameras. And this kind of motion capture has been around for a long time too, with having little buttons and sensors on your body, cameras all over the room tracking where you are. But the cool thing is, then we have the Kinect. And so the Kinect is this great consumer item that can be used for tracking where a person is. So in my lab, actually, we had a lot of fun with all the dance games.
Right. And another peripheral.
Yeah. So the big part of all this is we've got this big problem for the computer to integrate all of these data along with the virtual reality system. So here's my kind of vision. We're living in this thing way over on the left side. Everything that we do is in the real world. Everything you see, everything you touch, input, output is all over there. So what we're trying to do is to create this more and more immersive event of taking over your visual sense, taking over your auditory, haptic, things that you're feeling, vibrating, hitting you, kinesthetic, turning you around, and we're not going to get into the olfactory yet. And then what the computer has to receive is the head tracking, eye tracking, all of your pointing, movements, and everything else. So when we can display that information, capture that information, and get more and more of it, then we're going to get more and more into an immersive virtual experience. So we mentioned augmented reality. Anybody know what's the difference between virtual and augmented? You here.
Augmented reality just projected on the real world.
Yeah, so you start with the real world, and you start projecting virtual things into it, like objects, labels, et cetera, et cetera. There's also a really cool idea. I came across this paper on mixed reality, and the way in which, so this is kind of a system of mixed reality in which the person at the top has a visor, it could be Google Glass. Anybody ever play with Google Glass? You can't even buy it anymore.
That's why you bought.
Yeah.
I think nobody touched it.
Yeah, everybody in our lab, several people had Google Glass, and it was like they felt funny wearing it, or else they felt like, hey, I'm really special, I'm wearing it. And nobody trusted being around them because of the camera. So anyway, with one system, you're seeing the real world. The computer is also seeing the real world, and being able to project or create images that are displayed on that visor as well. So that I can now have, I could fill up this room with people. I could fill up all the chairs that are empty, with avatars that aren't real, but it make me feel better. So, so that's the augmented at the top. The middle one is kind of a mixture in which there are virtual objects in here, but I can also have the input from the camera. So I've now got goggles, but I have a mixture of the virtual world and the cameras of the real world. So it's that weird kind of mixture. And the second is mediated view of the real world. So I'm actually not in it, but it's being combined from the two things. There's some interesting systems that do this that are kind of not very immersive, but I was scaring my son earlier in my class. There's an app on the iPhone. Let's see, it's L'Oreal. It's this cosmetic thing where it takes a picture of your face, and then you can put lipstick on it, add mascara, and it'll track your face and track the makeup on your face as well. Home Depot actually has a system as well that you can scan it around the room and change the color of your walls to see if you'd like some different paint colors. So that's a cool augmented reality system. Yeah.
I heard some clothing stores. I don't know if what country it was in, but some of them have like a big screen and people would stand in front of it, and you can actually like try on clothes, like different kinds of clothes by just standing there. So, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So there's an incredible number of applications for this.
Google just had a video of a test of their system of La Bamba, right? The song La Bamba. So they would put up, while the song was playing, because La Bamba has 15 different things, they would put up a sign, and then with the Spanish words, right? And then put on the film, and the Google Translate functions would project the English words right over the Spanish words and replace them.
Yeah, brilliant.
Right? The idea of, taking a scan in a street that you don't know any of the languages and simply say, "Dear God, where's the bathroom?" Look for what the bathroom sign is. At least I assume that's where the Google folks are trying to aim their stuff for.
Yeah, I think that'll be brilliant traveling in another country. So I can look at a menu and it's translating it for me. Road signs, everything else.
That was from the company that Google bought.
Right. They might have. Google buys people.
They all do. Yeah, so this is kind of the augmented reality. I can lay more and more of that virtual world over it. Both in, again, in visual, auditory, so I can now have things translated. I can get additional voices, etc. So, what's coming on the scene next is really exciting. And that's where we get to, is it going to happen or is it not going to happen? Some people, have even questioned, is this going to be the virtual boy of the 21st century? Hopefully not. None of them are made by Nintendo. In fact, as I understand, Nintendo is totally bowed out of the VR market.
And there's considerably more money behind it, the current push.
Yeah.
With Facebook getting involved.
So, Mike, you want to talk about the Oculus for a second?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was the leader of the pack in terms of getting the ball rolling and getting the Kickstarter started, and with John Carmack behind it, and really generating that interest. Well, it's here, it's time for virtual reality finally, they've released the first developer kit, then another, and I think at this point people are like, when's it gonna come already? But it's, you know, it's just a lot of time for developing all the applications and getting the things right, the technological challenges. But yeah, there's, I think they switched to 2 screens actually with the consumer version.
Okay.
So I think they did switch that. The DK2 has the 1 screen. I think it's at 75 hertz, and then I think the last I heard, the consumer version will have 2 screens at 90 hertz, and which is a huge challenge for a typical PC today. So it's that's one of the big questions. And they do have the integrated audio, the headphones, and with full degree of freedom. And they initially were dead set on making it a sit-down experience. And I think just because it's tethered, where the worry of people trying to walk around and tripping or running into things. But they're now saying it could be a standing in one place experience.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the YouTube video of the guy who was on the roller coaster standing in a demo, and he goes, you know, you have to have a catcher behind him because he can flip over. So best in a seated position.
Yeah.
But I think the point for all of these is really, it's very, very difficult, because if some company releases the hardware without the games, and without the software, and without the SDKs and everything else in place, it's just not going to happen. I mean, why would you buy a box or buy some goggles that don't do anything
Practical.
yeah. How many people have heard about this system?
No?
Yeah, so I mean, I was talking to somebody at the university in my class who works in a VR lab, and she hadn't heard about this either. But I think I probably heard about it through Dig magazine. I don't know, it's my main source. But this is like really exciting. HTC is a Korean phone company, and they are demoing this system, which, you know, again has 2 screens with a high resolution. And what's really weird about it, it's got like tons of sensors on this device. You know, all the gyroscope sensors, as well as these 2 base stations with infrared sensors to get distance and location and everything, so that they know where you are in the room. So this is not going to be a sit-down experience. You'll be able to walk around with this, so it does get the XYZ location of the person in the room. It also takes a picture of the room, so it knows where the walls are, and then alerts you if you're going to hit your head on the wall. And the really cool thing is that it is now in cahoots with Steam. So it will work with your PC with Steam. But again, you know, then the question is you know, what kind of computer are you going to be running that's going to do this? So it looks great. The demos kind of look great. I have not experienced it, but we will see. This is actually projected to come out at the end of this year.
So that'll be the first one out.
Yeah, that's weird. You know, the one nobody's heard of is the first one, you know, at the store. Sony Morpheus is kind of a fascinating one. It's a little bit lower end, but supposedly has a pretty good wide field of vision. You'll see that the resolution is a little bit lower per eye, but the cool thing is it'll plug into your PS4 and use the Move controllers. How many have those?
How
He actually likes them. I mean, he said that they're fairly accurate.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
I've used them.
Yeah.
Well, we were using it in my lab, and my students they really didn't like it very much in terms of the control. Maybe it was the games they were playing that were really stupid. So So this will be probably really kind of a nice consumer path to go in. They haven't released the price of it, but people are expecting around $500. And this is the last system I want to talk about, the HoloLens, which has the most amazing demos, very, very compelling. Microsoft does amazing demos because they're doing the demo. And people who have actually then experienced it have said, how come I'm only seeing this much, you know? And I've got to move my head all the time to see things. And
Did anyone see the Minecraft presentation where it was a huge area that he could like look around in the real world? And it looked amazing.
So I don't know. This is still kind of in development. There's no timeline. They're doing a lot of research with education for this system because it does allow you to kind of be in a room and see the globe and walk through and around dinosaurs and bones and stuff like that. So I kind of want to open it up a little bit to what has been your experience so far with virtual reality? Yeah.
I have a couple. I mean, like, the first one I did this thing at Disney World once when I was a kid. It was amazing. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it. And then I got my hands on the Oculus like last January, February, and I was playing Elite Dangerous with it, and that was like ridiculous. It was a little blurry. I couldn't figure it out. I don't know if that's just with DK2, if that's just a problem with it, or if it was that game. So it was a little blurry, but I could see, and I had a bunch of people come into my room and try it, and I was just jazzed. I could like see space shooting, and then I can watch the enemy exploding over my head. And but a lot of people just got motion sick, which I didn't at all. I felt like I could do it for hours, but
yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Any other experiences too? Yeah.
Do you consider AR and part of the question?
Mm-hmm.
I talked about the 3DS AR cards.
Oh yeah.
Because that was intense attempt at it, didn't really sell that well, and some people tried first to explain. They would take one of the AR cars, make it to basically the size of a car or a truck, and go to the top of a skyscraper and project basically a tower-sized Mario onto their screen, just for the heck of pushing the technology out. And it, of course, was still in Japan. Some did it with one of their, Japan is known for their robot animes or giant mechs, so he decided to make one using this VR cards. He just lay it on the floor, go get the floor, take a picture of it, there it is, and moves and everything. Maybe we'll do Godzilla next.
Yeah, those are really, really interesting ideas of being able to have systems that could, project stuff on the walls and change everything around.
I want to know your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of gotten into anime recently, and there's my son over there got me to watch Psychopath. Ever seen Psychopath?
Psychopath is a great show.
Yes.
In which all the reality is augmented, so that I can change into a suit right now, change the environment, have everything the way you want it to look, and for other people to see you as. So.
Robotic Notes it's a near now anime, and everybody, part of the gag of the show is it's near now. So some kids want to make a giant robot, but they can't make a giant robot work right because the technology isn't there. So they have a giant thing that moves, and they tell everybody, bring up your controllers and look at it through your controllers, and then as the robot moves, the skin, as an augmented reality, is a giant, something much more dramatic than just a wireframe moving around. A whole bunch of shows in Japan have been playing around with augmented reality and how does that work? There's like a whole list of them.
Yeah,
I
so
can't
that-
remember them off the top of my head.
Yeah, so that makes it keeps me wondering, why isn't Nintendo, why isn't Japan in this market?
You realize Nintendo just announced a new AR game like a couple days ago. It's gonna be on the phones, and you're gonna go around the world and catch Pokemon.
Pokemon Go.
Okay. Yeah, anybody over here? Experiences?
So I got to actually try out Project Morpheus, and they had like 5 or so demos. But the demo I played, it was a bank heist mission, and so basically you're sitting in this car, and you use both of the move controllers, and the bottom button, I don't remember what that button is, but you grab things with that button, and like you're sitting in this van, and you can like interact with like anything in the van. You can like open up the glove box, and so basically like you're getting chased by these people, and you have a gun. Like a machine gun, so you can like open the door and like look out like in the back or behind the van and shoot behind the van, and when you reload you actually have to like grab a mag and like shove it at the bottom of your controller, keep firing. I had a lot of fun playing with that.
So it was really good?
Yeah, I think it was really good. The only problem is, since it was a demo, it was like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that long. And apparently that was like the best demo at where we were at E3, and I heard some other demos that were not good.
My demo made me sick within 3 minutes.
Okay, one more.
Well, mine was more about combining the basically VR goggles with the Kinect wireframe detection of your body. So they're trying to do something that requires you to move your hands around as well as
Yes.
body. So in other words, it was more VR and motion capture at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I have not seen much try to do that. Because basically if you move your hand in front of your face, it would know that because it has the detection of line of sight. So you can literally look at your hands. That's the first thing people do in VR. Look at their hands. And you can see your fingers moving and everything in front of you. Very interesting experience. And you're looking at your armor as you're wearing. They don't play in the game, they're just looking at themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that'll be one of the interesting things when we start talking about what kind of games are good and what sorts of things can be done within the games. So I keep talking to more and more people that get VR sickness. Originally it was simulator sickness when the military was developing these systems. And, obvious discomfort, nausea, sweating, pallor. The main rationale or theory behind this is that it's because of this kind of disconnect between what you're seeing and what you're feeling kinesthetically or in your vestibular systems to be able to reconcile that. And when there is that discrepancy, then your body reacts to it. I was going to bring a puke bag, barf bag, with me, but I forgot it at home. But it really is, it is a very, very serious thing for a certain proportion. The proportion is about 10 to 15% of the population. So that's, still, the market is pretty good if we've got 85% of people that are going to be happy with the system, and we just eliminate a few, kind of like shoving out the colorblind people or the left-handed people. But the speculation is that as the systems get tighter and tighter and more responsive, that will start to go away. Also, after people might be able to accommodate it, you just go through 60 hours of sickness and then you'll be fine. The other problem is now you're fine and you've been in the system for hours and hours and you take it off. And then you fall over because you now have to accommodate back to the real world.
We would call that reality sickness.
Yeah. Re-entering. Yeah.
Has anybody tried the various air sickness or seasickness medications in order to mitigate VR sickness in either direction?
Yeah, I think there has been some research on that. I'm not as familiar with that as I should, but yeah, it'll have sort of the same effect as a very, very close relationship between motion sickness and VR sickness. The problem, I guess, is those medications also have side effects.
Dramamine
Do you
I
fall
took
asleep?
Dramamine this morning so I could work in the car on the drive down.
Yeah, okay.
And I mean, if it works for VR, that wouldn't be so bad if you don't do it, every day.
Yeah.
Or,
But I'm actually curious if it would work or not, because maybe it's a different kind of effect.
or it might just be the sort of thing you need in order to assimilate into VR. If you're part of that 15%, maybe you need to go through a Dramamine or course for about 10 or 15 hours to sort of ease you into it. And after that, because people do learn to deal with seasickness and motion sickness, it just requires a certain amount of
But then you can't take it off until you kind of let it
edge
move
around, right? Dulling of the edges.
Yeah.
Maybe related, but there's a test called the false limb test, where they will have a false limb in your hand, and they'll brush both at the same time to create a connection to the false limb. And out of nowhere, without telling you, they'll just swing a hammer at the false limb
Yes.
and see if you react to it, and majority of people do.
Right.
Some of them don't, with a face saying, what are you trying to do? So maybe it's that same connection with the VR, is that some people have a sensory input that causes them to have a connection to something that's false, and after that connection, things applied to it gives them the reaction that it's real.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the reverse of this, where you have something that's false you attach to,
Mm-hmm.
and you just don't realize that now you're back in reality.
Well, that's an interesting study, because what if you die in VR? How will your mind react to that, or get your hand hit with a hammer in VR?
Some traumatic situation.
Yeah,
You know.
something.
Well, I think the military has done some stuff in that general area. I think depending on the level of reality of the VR, you get the equivalent of PTSD. Well, or whatever the current name for the syndrome is, you can get PTSD from VR. I mean, that's actually one of the big problems with the drone pilots.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That, and the amount of immersion that a drone pilot has is far less than what we would consider VR. But these guys are experiencing PTSD symptoms that are fairly standard rate for combat,
Yeah.
right? Despite the fact that they're not in combat, the human body is enough, gets excited enough that we get the equivalent of PTSD. So maybe we won't die, but our brains will be very unhappy with us.
Right,
And
because,
punish us.
yes, because basically, although they're not in combat, they're probably killing more people than people who are in combat, and particularly the collateral damage.
Right, but the thing is, their brains still release the same chemicals.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter that they have if they're in the physical world or not. Their brain says, yeah, things are blowing up. Doesn't matter if I'm there or not, I'm seeing things blow up. The brain produces the right chemicals, and if you get the wrong feedback when your brain is sitting in that suit, you get PTSD.
Yeah. So this actually gets into like a whole giant discussion, which I don't have on these slides, but that whole issue of getting yourself so immersed into a world and living in that world as if it is your world. So it becomes, essentially a place where all of your values are acted out, all of your desires, and the whole culture of the world is imposing itself upon you. And I guess the anime series for that is Sword Art Online,
Yeah.
in which the best line is, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it. Something about how the player, this might be a different book, the gamer and the player are one. So you and your avatar are really one. It's not two different entities. So how you play as your avatar is how you should and would play in the real world. So you finally come to this realization, you know, I am really killing people in this game. And that is not my value system. And so I will live a more generous, compassionate, you know, giving life in this game, even if it means that I, you know, lose. You know, it's kind of like, would you lay down your life, you know, in this world for a friend? Would you lay down your life in the virtual world for a friend?
But it's interesting, it's all the conversation panel coming back to our emotional study.
Yes. Of course, you realize Sword Art Online cheated because a flaw in their VR helmet would fry their brains if they died.
Yeah.
Right? There was a microwave thing that would blow up their head if they died. And it was sort of like all part of an evil plot by this overmind. Though, to take it into something more realistic, would you be willing to suffer basically a permanent PTSD thing in order to, would you be willing to risk that sort of psychological damage in order to live out what you think is the proper way to live on an avatar?
Yeah.
To musically say, this is the point where the game where I duck out, or it's not worth it, or there's also the different, you know, ways you can sort of
Yeah, so,
handle that sort of question.
right, so in Grand Theft Auto, you know, you don't have any problem running around, shooting people, killing cops, et cetera, because you're not really that, I mean, you know it's a game. You know you're not really immersed in it. But if you couldn't get out of that environment, if you were kind of stranded in it for hours and hours and hours, then things become different. To the extent that, you know, how do we know that we're not all actually immersed in a game right now and we just don't realize, you know, that we're here? Yeah.
Well, it's a pretty boring game if it is.
That's right. But I think coming back to your statement about the PTSD and the drones, I mean, there's a different, from a psychological perspective, you're an expert on this, there is a difference between killing someone, even though your VR experience is so limited, being a drone pilot, versus killing somebody in the game. That's a whole different reality set. That your brain able to amplify and understand what is real and what's not, and that's what the difference there is, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be different at all. We'll have the same experience playing Grand Theft Auto versus someone doing the
Right, but is it a continuum, or is there a solid rate? Is it, if you were able to pump in enough CPU time to make Grand Theft Auto photorealistic, right? And you went, and when you shot somebody in a photorealistic Grand Theft Auto, you know, in an immersive environment, would your brain be able to, your brain will still have that removed, but it would be a far smaller remove than what you have when you're sitting down at your desk, sitting at a nice monitor. And I think, so from what I've seen of the arguments, I might be wrong since you guys are studying this, that there isn't a firewall that prevents you from going over. It's more like a continuum, and then as the technology advances, as the VR environment becomes more and more immersive and more you become closer and closer to that difference between the game and reality being, or the artificial environment and reality. As the differences shrink, the effects on your psychology will shrink. The differences between game effect and real life effect will shrink also.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that it is a continuum, but I think people are, you know, from childhood are very sensitive to the issue of something being fantasy world versus a real world. As a drone pilot, they know that's a real world and a real kill. The graphic realism is actually pretty poor as a drone pilot. You're not really seeing all that blood, and you're not seeing, you know, what you would see in Mortal Kombat. But it's the knowledge of the fact that this was a real event, as opposed to a fictitious event, I think there is that point, there might be somewhere along that continuum where you could lose that and go off into, this game is real. And I would, after this game, come out with a PTSD.
I think it might be interesting to note, at least from some of the accounts I've heard, a lot of the PTSD in drone pilots isn't so much the kills. It's because they have to have permission to fire anything when they're watching from above, or they have to have permission to break radio silence. They're watching from above and they can see 5 miles down the road there's an IED, but they can't tell their guys. And so they have to watch them drive 5 miles and hit that IED.
Well, also, part of the thing with drone pilots is they're not just randomly shooting, going out and randomly finding somebody and shooting them. They're, in some cases, watching guys for weeks beforehand. Then they shoot the person, blow up their house, and then they stick around and watch the aftermath because they want to see who's coming to the house so they can follow those guys, right? So rather than basically clean kills, they're creating a pseudo relationship, right? Even if it's a relationship only in their own head.
Yeah.
Right? On these little action figures that are on the ground that they don't really see, they're imbuing the things that they see with full human characteristics. In the same way, you can, in a long-term VR environment, yes, that's a stick figure, Gumby figure that's walking around. But humans are great machines. We find meaning in people's faces and everything, right? Sure, going into a building and, squishing Gumbies would be funny. But what if, in a VR environment, you had a Gumby that you sort of stuck around with for a long time, and then one day you step on it, right? The sort of emotional, it's still a Gumby, it's still not real, but now you've sort of created an artificial relationship, which, from your mind's sake, is the same thing as a real relationship.
Yeah, interestingly, in the VR world, your little Gumpy can regenerate.
Right.
So, no problem.
So the question is, it's a bust or is it gonna be great? Right, that's our next.
Yeah, so what do you think is going to happen with these systems coming down? Is it going to be the Virtual Boy one more time, or should we all invest in these companies immediately? And there's going to be big money here.
I work for a visual effects company, and obviously we do a lot of CG and stuff for commercials. And what happened was, for this we did this one commercial for Nike, where we created this room for the sneaker. And then since we had this whole room created with fully 360-degree view, we got the Oculus and we kind of set it up so we can look inside of that room to kind of just show the sneaker and show the room itself, and started pitching it to other clients as an idea for VR. And then somebody bought into it, and now we did this spot where it's a football game. You're in the center of a stadium. You can look all around. And depending where you look at a key moment, it triggers the action of the players. So if you look to the right, it'll be a passing play, and your character automatically passes for you. You look to the left, it'll be like a running back. And it's for a cell phone company right now. It's for the I think it's a Samsung phone that you put into a headset.
VR.
Yeah. Companies are starting to buy into it, so maybe it'll get a little bit of momentum.
Yeah, I think that's going to be it. It's not just going to be the consumer itself, but it's going to be other companies promoting devices.
Yeah, I think we're hitting a technological convergence point where the technology's there, and that's going to be a major factor, which is sort of inevitable once you get to this point.
Yeah.
I think we got like a real chance based on like the conversation from before, for just like slow life simulations becoming a big deal. Like a hiking sim, like a really in-depth hiking game. That's what I would.
How many
Yeah.
people want to do the Appalachian Trail but never can do it? Imagine doing the Appalachian Trail in VR. Every weekend, you do 2 hours of the Appalachian Trail.
It's always summer.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Mount Everest, I don't know why.
Right. Actually, my argument isn't, it doesn't matter if it's a bust or a boom in the next few years. The military believes big in simulation. They're gonna drop money into it until they get it. Military equipment costs so much, right? The new fighters that they're doing, it costs so much to run them per hour. They're basically telling the pilots that you'll only ever fly your planes when we actually need you to bomb something.
That's right. Yeah.
So the military is going to drop money into VR until they get it. And at that point, somebody will say, 3 or 4 years afterwards, the technology will go out into the commercial market. I really believe that augmented reality making and construction is going to be big.
Yeah.
Once that is, because imagine being able to do work on your own car. You know, you slide in your augmented reality code for your car, you pop your hood and say, I want to change my engine light. And then the instructions just pop over your goggles.
It shows where your hand should go, which way it should turn, what
Right.
thing to pick
That,
up.
or, make it something that everybody understands. You want to make a Lego set? Download the Lego AR program into your AR glasses, and it says, what's next? That Lego is next. You pick it up. That Lego goes there, right?
You'll
Yeah.
never lose a piece.
Right, so this is going to be in VR, so I don't actually have to have these stupid little plastic pieces,
Right.
which I have like 1,001 pieces in our attic from all of my kids having Lego sets. that-
Right, but, so even if people never get into VR games, augmented reality as sort of, I can imagine Home Depot and Lowe's, right? Coming up with hundreds of programs just to give
Yeah.
out to people for Home Depot repair.
Yeah, one of the projections I was reading, I think it's a company called Digit Capital, was doing these projections into the next 10 years about where VR is going to be in terms of billions of dollars. And they basically say that AR will be like 3 times that. Because of the fact that with VR, it's only going to be tethered in a room, but AR is going to be the whole world. You can go anywhere with AR goggles in a cell network. Yeah.
What do you think VR here is for people who thought to learn don't have a second chance, like surgery? Or their work, their salary is paid for because of that one reason. And can basically give them a HUD explaining the patient's vitals while they're
Yeah.
performing surgery on them.
Yeah.
And the other nurses around supporting them can also see the vitals too.
Yeah.
Well,
Right. In fact, what will be interesting is if these systems can be advanced enough with instructions overlaid, where do I do this, where do I cut this, we won't have to have surgeons that are trained as medicine. We just have to have really good video game players. People that have really good eye-hand coordination.
trauma center.
Well, I think the interesting, it's sort of been an underlying theme in all of
Okay,
these.
we need to set up our demo. Right? So,
Do you have another slide?
yeah, so I think what's really exciting about this is that we're right at this verge. We're at this incredible brink of this technology coming of age. In our lab, we've actually done research on touch screens for like 30 years. But 30 years ago, they were so bad, nobody ever wanted a touch screen. The resolution was terrible. And now everybody wants touch screens. Same thing will happen with VR. Now the technology is finally to the resolution and cheap, because these little chips, are now just can be mass produced and have all of these tracking systems.
Where are we with haptic technology? Like feedback, where are we with that? I don't know.
Yeah, people are really working on it.
There's no,
And they're doing some incredible things. One of the interesting things is the haptic screen, in which people complain that I've got buttons here, but I can't feel them. And so there are screens that actually pop up buttons according to where the software says they should be. So stuff is happening there. A lot of stuff with haptic vibrators on the body to feel senses around. And so actually the lab at the University of Maryland it's really into wearable computing. So shirts that have haptic devices in them, so you can like a pregnant woman can feel the amplification of the baby's heart